Drug king, who was for years one of the world's most wanted men, was gunned down today by Colombian police in the Colombian city of Medellin.
What happens to the family of the most feared drug lord after he's gone? Have you ever wondered what life was like for Pablo Escobar's wife and children once the king of cocaine was gunned down? While the world celebrated his death, his family was plunged into chaos, hunted by enemies, rejected by nations, and forced into hiding. But where did they go? How did they survive? And is the Escobar name still alive in the shadows? When Pablo Escobar was alive, his family lived in a world of unimaginable wealth, wrapped in silk, but soaked in fear. His wife, Maria Victoria Henao, met Pablo when she was just 13. By the time she was 15, she had married a man already beginning his climb toward becoming one of the most notorious criminals in history. Together, they had 2 children, Juan Pablo Escobar, who would later change his name to Sebastian, and a daughter, Manuela Escobar, who was said to be Pablo's favorite. They lived in luxury, private zoos, gold-plated toilets, and mansions surrounded by armed guards. But behind those golden gates was constant paranoia. Pablo knew that enemies were everywhere. He built escape tunnels beneath his properties, kept suitcases full of cash ready for flight, and had loyal men shadowing his family day and night. Maria Victoria kept a low profile. Despite his many affairs and brutal crimes, she stood by him, shielding her children from the chaos, at least as much as she could. But the more power Pablo gained, the more dangerous their world became. The threat wasn't just from law enforcement. Rival cartels, hitmen, even corrupt politicians had their eyes on the Escobar name. By the early 1990s, Escobar's war with the government and rival cartels had turned Medellin into a battlefield. The family's once lavish lifestyle vanished almost overnight. They began living like fugitives, jumping from one safe house to another. At one point, Pablo forced his wife and children to live in complete isolation, cut off from the outside world for over a year. Manuela, just a child, once asked for a unicorn, and Pablo had one made by mutilating a horse and attaching a horn to its head. That story speaks volumes. Even in hiding, he tried to fulfill her every wish, no matter how bizarre or disturbing. In one freezing hideout, Manuela was so cold that Escobar reportedly burned $2 million in cash just to keep her warm. They had no contact with schools, friends, or relatives. Even Maria Victoria was unaware of where they would go next. Pablo's network of safe houses stretched across the country, and he trusted only a handful of people with their locations. During these years underground, the children aged in silence, surrounded by whispers, gunfire, and ghost stories about their father's enemies. On December 2, 1993, Pablo Escobar was killed on a Medellin rooftop. For the world, it was the end of a bloody chapter. For his family, it was the beginning of something even more terrifying. Suddenly, they were no longer protected. The Colombian government wasn't interested in protecting Escobar's widow and children. Instead, they were seen as liabilities or even threats. The Cali cartel, which had long opposed Pablo, believed the family knew where his fortune was hidden. Los Pepes, a paramilitary group formed by Pablo's enemies, also wanted revenge. Death threats poured in. The family tried to escape Colombia, but they were denied asylum by one country after another. The United States refused them. So did Germany, Brazil, and several others. Wherever they turned, doors closed. No one wanted to harbor the family of the world's most infamous drug lord. Eventually, after months of hiding and negotiation, Argentina accepted them, on one condition: they had to disappear completely. The family arrived in Buenos Aires under new identities. Maria Victoria became Maria Isabel Santos Caballero. Juan Pablo became Sebastian Marroquin. Manuela stayed out of sight. They rented an apartment in a quiet neighborhood and tried to live a normal life. Sebastian studied architecture and later opened a design firm. Maria Victoria began a small real estate business to support the family. But even exile wasn't peaceful. In 1999, their secret was exposed when Colombian journalists found them. Suddenly, the media was outside their door. Then came the legal troubles. In 2018, Maria Victoria and Sebastian were arrested in Argentina, accused of laundering money through a local criminal named El Rey de la Cocaína. They denied involvement, but the court case was a brutal reminder. The Escobar name never truly escaped the shadow of the past. They were released later, but the scrutiny hasn't stopped. Even decades after Pablo's death, the weight of his empire continues to press down on the family he left behind. Manuela Escobar, the youngest in the family, was just 9 years old when her father died. Her story is one of silence. Unlike her brother, she never wrote books, gave interviews, or attempted to explain her father's legacy. Reports suggest she suffered severe trauma from her childhood. The constant running, the isolation, and the abrupt collapse of everything she knew deeply affected her mental health. After the family's relocation to Argentina, she changed her name and withdrew completely from public life. She reportedly refuses to speak about her father, and little is known about her adult years. Some sources claim she lives in Argentina under a completely different identity, supported quietly by her mother. Others say she remains under psychiatric care. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. She chose to disappear, and the world has respected her silence. Sebastian Marroquin has become the unlikely voice of the Escobar legacy. He chose not to glorify his father, but instead to confront the truth head-on. In his 2009 documentary, Sins of My Father, he apologized publicly to the families of those Pablo had murdered. He traveled across Colombia meeting the sons of Pablo's victims, offering words of remorse and seeking forgiveness. He also authored books, including Pablo Escobar, My Father, where he shared untold stories from inside the Escobar household. Stories of fear, love, and contradictions. Sebastian speaks internationally about peace and reconciliation, but he still lives with the consequences of his bloodline. Despite his efforts to distance himself, some still accuse him of profiting off the Escobar name. Others argue that his voice is necessary because no one else can tell the story from the inside. To this day, Sebastian walks a tightrope between redemption and reputation, between memory and identity. Pablo Escobar's death ended one of the bloodiest chapters in modern history, but for his family, it marked the beginning of a haunting exile. They lost everything: homes, protection, status, and peace. What remained was fear, isolation, and the impossible burden of a legacy built on cocaine and violence. His wife, Maria Victoria, lives in quiet survival, still carrying the secrets of a man who once ruled a nation through terror. His daughter Manuela lives in silence, erased by trauma, choosing anonymity over memory. And his son, Sebastian, continues to carry the Escobar name, not as a badge of honor, but as a warning to the world. The empire is gone, but the shadows it cast still stretch across borders and generations. Because when a man like Pablo Escobar dies, the real story begins with those he leaves behind.